There is a version of this story you already know, the version with the swelling music, the version where someone rises from nothing, finds their moment, and everything clicks into place like the universe finally remembers their name. You have seen that version. You have consumed it. You have felt something watching it, something warm and temporary that faded by morning. That is not this story. This is the version nobody films, the version that happened before the turning point. The version that lived in the hours between midnight and 4 in the morning, inside a car that smelled like damp clothing and broken plans. The version where there was no mentor arriving, no speech, no sudden clarity. Just cold, just silence, just the specific weight of a life that has gone completely wrong. This is the rags to riches, true story stripped of its cosmetics. Because here is what nobody tells you about the people who built something from nothing. The real ones, the ones who actually made it. They did not start their journey the moment things got better. They started it the moment they stopped waiting for better to arrive. That is the untold chapter. And it begins right now. You did not arrive at the bottom dramatically. That is the first thing. There was no single catastrophic moment where the floor gave way and you knew exactly where you stood. It came slowly, like water rising in a room you were too busy to notice was sealed. 1 month you were behind on rent. 2 months later you had rationalized it. 3 months later you had a system of explanation so convincing that you had almost persuaded yourself this was temporary. Temporary is the most dangerous word in the human language, because the temporary becomes a waiting room, and the waiting room becomes a residence. And before long you have furnished the waiting room, you have made it comfortable. You have stopped counting the days since you arrived. The people around you started to drift, not all at once, quietly. The way people always leave when the situation becomes more inconvenient than the relationship is worth. You told yourself they were the wrong people anyway. You were half right. But the half that was wrong cost you more than you admitted. You took work that diminished you. Not because you had to, not yet, but because you had begun to believe that diminished work was what you deserved. That belief is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply starts making your decisions while you are asleep. Money left faster than it arrived. Every system you built to hold it failed. Not because you were careless, because you were operating from a foundation that had already cracked beneath you and you were still pretending the ground was solid. You kept building upward. You kept expecting the structure to hold. It never held. Then came the night. Not a dramatic night, a Tuesday night. The specific, unremarkable kind of night that changes everything precisely because it does not look like it should. You had nowhere to go. Not in the way people say that loosely. In the literal, physical, coordinates do not exist sense of the phrase. The car, the bag, the phone is at 11%. The city moves around you as though you were furniture, as though you were part of the scenery that the living passed without seeing. You sat in that car, and the city hummed, and nobody came. And that is where this story actually begins, not at the bottom of a fall, at the beginning of a reckoning. Here is what collapse actually feels like from the inside. It is not despair. Despair would be too clean. Despair has an emotion attached to it, something dramatic enough to justify action. What you felt was something flatter and more sinister than despair. It was a grey, exhausted indifference. A numbness that had moved in so quietly, you did not notice it was occupying you until you realised you had not felt anything clearly in weeks. You stopped caring about the future, not because you gave up, because caring about the future required energy you were spending entirely on surviving the present hour. The future felt like a foreign country you did not have the currency to enter. And so you stopped looking at the map. People will tell you that rock bottom is a gift. They will say it with the confidence of people who have never actually been there. Rock bottom is not a gift, it is a fact, a brutal, clarifying fact. And facts do not care about your feelings regarding them. What rock bottom actually is, and what it strips away, is the performance. Every story you had been telling yourself about who you were, what you deserved, why things had gone wrong, who was responsible, all of it became exhausting to maintain. The energy required to keep those stories alive exceeded what you had available, and so, one by one, the stories stopped. And something else appeared in the silence. Not hope, not yet. Something quieter than hope and more durable. Something that did not need a reason to exist. A kernel, a refusal. Something underneath the numbness that was not performing, not waiting, and not explaining. Something that was simply still present. That thing, right there, that was the beginning of everything that came after. What you thought was the end was actually a demolition. There is a difference. An ending closes. A demolition clears ground for something that could not have been built while the old structure was still standing. You could not see that from inside the car. You cannot see a demolition from inside the building being torn down. But that is what was happening. Everything you had lost had been built on borrowed identity, borrowed approval, borrowed purpose. You had constructed a life that looked like yours but was largely made of what other people expected to see. When it fell, it was not your life falling, it was the version of you that had never really been you at all. The rags to riches true story everyone wants is the one where this realization arrives like lightning, where someone has an epiphany and wakes up transformed. That is not what happened. What happened was slower, more unglamorous, more real. You started noticing what remained when everything else was gone. Not what you wished you had, what actually remained, the specific way your mind worked, the problems you naturally moved toward, the things that made you angry in a productive way, the injustice of something being poorly done, something important being ignored, something broken that nobody was bothering to fix. Those things had always been there. You'd been too furnished, too comfortable, too surrounded by noise to hear them clearly. Silence has a way of making the essential audible. You were not being punished, you were being returned. Returned to a version of yourself that existed before the performance began, before you started building your life to face outward instead of inward. That version was still intact, still viable, still not inspiration, not mindset, specific, uncomfortable, relentless action taken in conditions that do not feel conducive to action. That is the mechanism. There is no other. You begin by identifying the one thing you can do tomorrow that requires zero resources and maximum honesty. Not the thing that sounds impressive, the thing that is actually possible with what you currently have access to. Write it down by hand, not on a phone, on paper. Because the act of writing it by hand makes it real in a way that typing does not. Your handwriting is the contract. Wake up before the problem does. The problem wakes at 7 and starts negotiating. You need to be at work before the negotiation begins. 5 in the morning. No phone for the first 90 minutes. No news. No content created by other people to tell you who you should be today. Just you and the work you wrote down last night. Do not tell anyone what you are building. Not yet. Not for the first 90 days. The moment you tell people, you begin performing the building instead of doing it. You get the dopamine of the announcement and it quietly substitutes for the discipline of the execution. Keep it sealed, keep it internal, let the work speak first. Find the specific intersection where your natural anger meets an underserved problem. Not a problem you read about, a problem you have lived, something broken that cost you something real. That intersection is where your purpose lives and where your market lives simultaneously. That is not a coincidence. That is how this works. Spend 2 hours every single day on the skill that directly produces revenue, not on learning about the skill, on performing it, on doing the actual thing, and then charge for it faster than feels comfortable. Discomfort in pricing is usually just unfamiliarity with your own value. Push through it, document everything that fails. The failure log is more valuable than the success log because it tells you with precision where the actual friction is. Most people abandon at friction. You investigate it. Friction is the map to the breakthrough. Get financially literate in the specific domain where you are building. Not generally, specifically. Understand the numbers of your lane until they are as familiar as your own name. Then do it again tomorrow and the day after that. Without permission, without applause, without waiting.